I'm reading today from The New God Image by Edward Edinger, and I'm reading from a letter in the appendix to Elined Kotschnig, dated June 30th, 1956. The letter is on page 164 of the book. Dr. Edinger obviously thought this letter was very important in Dr. Jung's oeuvre, in Dr. Jung's collected works, because he mentioned it in several books of his own. Page 166. Although the divine incarnation is a cosmic and absolute event, it only manifests empirically in those relatively few individuals capable of enough consciousness to make ethical decisions, i.e., to decide for the good. Therefore, God can be called good only inasmuch as he is able to manifest his goodness in individuals. His moral quality depends upon individuals. That is why he incarnates. Individuation and individual existence are indispensable for the transformation of God the Creator. The knowledge of what is good is not given a priori. It needs discriminating consciousness. That is already the problem in Genesis, where Adam and Eve have to be enlightened first in order to recognize the good and discriminate it from evil. There is no such thing as the good in general, because something that is definitely good can be as definitely evil in another case. Individuals are different from each other. Their values are different, and their situations vary to such an extent that they cannot be judged in general values and principles. For instance, generosity is certainly a virtue, but it instantly becomes a vice when applied to an individual that misunderstands it. In this case, one needs conscious discrimination. Your question concerning the relationship between the human being and an unconscious paradoxical God is indeed a major question. Although we have the most impressive paradigm of Old Testament piety that could deal with the divine antinomy. The people in the Old Testament could address themselves to an unreliable God by very overt attempts at propitiation. I mean in particular the repeated assertion and invocation of God's justice, and this in the face of indisputable injustice. They tried to avoid his wrath and to call forth his goodness. It is quite obvious that the old Hebrew theologians were continuously tormented by the fear of Yahweh's unpredictable acts of injustice. For the Christian mentality, brought up in the conviction of an essentially good God, the situation is much more difficult. One cannot love and fear at the same time anymore. Our consciousness has become too differentiated for such contradictions. We are therefore forced to take the fact of incarnation far more seriously than hitherto. We ought to remember that the fathers of the Church have insisted upon the fact that God has given himself to man's death on the cross so that we may become gods. The deity has taken its abode in man with the obvious intention of realizing its good in man. Thus we are the vessel or the children and the heirs of the deity suffering in the body of the slave.